Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us for the JS Mindset Weekly Call. My name's Denny. Today is Saturday, November 30th, 2019, and on the call today are the boys, Jim Sinclair, Bill Holter, and, of course, Dave. We hope you all had a great Thanksgiving last week. I was certainly grateful that the noise and disinformation from D.C. and the various news organizations was essentially ignored by the rest of the United States. At least for a few hours, the enjoyment of family and friends and a good meal allowed many of us to simply turn off all those distractions. But today we're going to get right back at it in regards to the situation in precious metals, to the dilemma the central bank finds itself in, to the markets, to the economy. And it'll be good to get the boys' take on so many of these things. But in the course of our conversation today, always remember we are not giving you investment advice. We're trying to give you another perspective of the economic world to add to your own perspective, just so you can be prepared for what might certainly be some very trying times. As always, thanks for investing in the premium side of JS Mindset. There's always plenty of new postings going on over there with Bill and Jim and Dave all putting into the soup. Jim, you talked about the price suppression of gold for as long as I've been listening to and reading about you. You also talk about free gold. It just seems that the bad guys are holding gold down with more and more paper contracts are always going to win. Although we all know that at some point the house of cards is going to fall down and gold will launch to new highs that we even never dreamed of, nobody wants to be the one that demands delivery and thereby collapses the system. Now, we've gone over that before, but can the collapse come by just sheer exhaustion?
Well, the answer to that is absolutely yes, because what we're experiencing right now is what's experienced by a drug addict. In other words, they feel like they own the world, control the world. They're king of whatever they see. But the truth is, physically, they have no energy. In other words, they can wail around, but they really are empty. Okay, it's a great party. It's amazing to see people running their credit through the roof on a continuing basis as long as credit will be supplied to them. And it honestly seems like those supplying the credit have lost contact with the real world too. Exhaustion is exactly what will happen. And exhaustion too in the political sense, exhaustion in the sense that we're all very tired of not having a government. And at the same time, what's happening around the world on the London Bridge in Amsterdam and in the Yellow Jackets in Hong Kong, this is not exactly the stuff that a prosperous world or a non-prosperous world is made out of. So the answer is it's a world on coke. And yes, they will run out of exhaustion, and in my opinion, they already have, but then you know that. I firmly believe that looking back, you'll see this probably right around the prices we've recently seen as being just another opportunity. And yes, they are creating paper, but infinite paper has never sustained a system. So by creating the paper, they're going to devalue the paper that's out there, the fiat paper, and bring on what we expect. So yes, it will die of exhaustion.
Denny, we had three separate events this week, and they all pertain to, if you want to call it, and I think I posted something to this effect, if you want to call it a good old-fashioned bank run. First, I think it was Monday, Putin came out and said the dollar is going to collapse soon. Then you had news that Poland repatriated 100 tons of gold from Britain, and I believe Slovakia also announced they're actually purchasing 100 tons of gold. All of that together it's smoke. It's the rumblings of, like I said, a good old-fashioned bank run.
We're going to talk a little bit later. Go ahead,
Go ahead,
No,
Jim.
it's all right, Jim. Go ahead.
Bill, how about the company in China that was
yes,
not?
that was one other thing that was not directly gold related, but last night it was announced. I don't remember the name of the company, but it was the 132nd in size of the Chinese S&P 500. It's a state-owned enterprise, and they look like they're going to default on December 9th. And I put a back and forth. I don't know if it's posted yet. I think it should be, but I put a back and forth between me and Frank regarding that. And my take immediately, as soon as I saw the headline, my take was they're going to burn the system down. And Frank's take was, well, there you go. There's your response to the trade war. And if you follow it through or try to connect the dots, what he's saying is that they're going to burn the credit markets down and thus unleash gold. And in essence, what they're doing is they're marking up their own gold reserves.
All right. Now, Bill, what we're talking about, we're seeing these bank runs in China.
Yes.
And I was surprised that the Chinese would not step in to stop it. And now I understand that they're not only not going to stop it, they're going to allow a bank failure to occur and not backstop the depositors. This is a small regional bank, if I understand it. Bill,
no,
this...
The one I'm talking about, this is a conglomerate. I don't know if they have anything to do with banking at all. It's not a bank. I mean, it's a conglomerate of like every industry you can imagine. But it is a state-owned enterprise. And the danger of letting a state-owned enterprise go down means that investors who have invested in credit to other state-owned enterprises they're gonna panic and they'll start selling their bonds. So you'll have a credit market problem in China. And I've said all along, China does not. They know the ending. They know that the whole credit system is going to come down. But what did they do with the credit versus what did we do with the buildup of credit? We basically ate for 20, 30, 40 years. We ate, drank, and we're happy, and when the bill comes due, we can't pay it, and what are we left with? Nothing, because we already ate. China is left with all sorts of infrastructure that they've used that credit for. And if the credit goes down, they don't care because they're left with brand new roads, bridges, airports, railway, you name it.
I'm going to go back and check my notes because I made two notes, and I thought it was on Wednesday and Thursday, that the bank runs, literally people standing in front of the Chinese banks.
Yeah, it's two separate events.
Okay.
You're correct. But
well, what do you think about that? If China said they're just going to let them, wag in the wind, they're not going to step in and support it, which means those regional banks, literally just like the 1930s in the United States, banks went belly up.
Well, I think it goes back to the original thought process reading the headline. They're going to allow the paper system to burn down.
Yiminy. Dave, it came out and...
Here's another alternative. You think about it. Now you say allow it. Tell me what the alternative is. So allow is simply a question.
Yeah, they can't hold it up anyway. They know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So the first question about exhaustion, we might be seeing it right there. And the key to exhaustion is the first fellow who steps away from the game of musical chairs.
Dave, I read that Hong Kong, and it's really hard to get good information on Hong Kong, Dave. Your sources are probably better than mine, but I did read Jim Willey, who wrote that HSBC, which is the British bank, right there in Hong Kong, might be at the center of the riots and the civil unrest and might even be funding the rioters. HSBC is a British-owned bank. And I'm not sure the whole inference by Willey, but I believe that he is thinking that the Chinese insurance company Ping An is trying to acquire HSBC, hostile or otherwise, and that also Huawei might be involved. Now, Dave, you want to take a swing at this one as to what is really going on in Hong Kong?
Well, again, from my point, it's actually pretty simple. It's a color revolution sponsored by the United States. If you look at the offices that NGOs, the FBI, the CIA has in Hong Kong, this was an effort to upset the apple cart and, make China look bad. England has used Hong Kong as a money laundering center forever. And England is at the heart of all these financial crimes. London is a financial criminal enterprise, just as I believe Wall Street is. They're tied at the hip. So attacking China was, this was their way of attacking China and trying to make China look weak. Personally, I think China, I don't think China is going to get or lose any credibility over Hong Kong. There's nothing to gain or be lost. Who's losing are the protesters. They've destroyed their own school. They've been shown that they're nothing but a mob of rioters. I mean, there were thousands of petro bombs in the college. Think about what the United States would do if that went on in one of our schools, Danny. I mean, just to think about it, with the screaming bloody murder, that these criminal snowflakes, who do they think they are? So that being the case, I'm completely of the mind that this was an orchestrated event, just like Bolivia was an orchestrated event, just like the alleged protests in Iran were an orchestrated event. For anybody who listened, Iran raised their gas prices to what, 12 cents a gallon? I mean, Iran still has the lowest gas prices in the world. I don't know where you guys live, but where I live, gas is just shy of $3 a gallon. And if you're in California, Hawaii, it's way more than that. It's our MO. It's how we attack our adversaries. And, you could use a host of countries that we've done this to, and we're still doing it to. But in simple terms, what's going on in Hong Kong was nothing more than a means of trying to discredit China at a time that we're in this trade war, and it just gives the press a chance every single day to attack China. And again, I don't see why they're attacking China. Hong Kong technically functions independently, does it not?
It's supposed to.
Yep.
Until 2047. That's
right.
The deal.
Well, so my point is okay, I understand that they were upset about the possible extradition bill that Hong Kong was going to allow to take place. But that was shelved a long time ago. So, okay, we met your demands. So what's your problem? Oh, we'll dream up a new problem. And after that, we'll dream up another new problem. And then we'll dream up another new problem. It's just, that's how life works when you go up against the empire. They will just keep attacking you. And as long as they have the press backing them up, the American public just really does not, they don't search for answers. They're not critical thinkers. As we've said 100 times, they're so busy trying to make ends meet, get their kids to the sporting events, get to work, get their car running, pay their bills, that they really don't have time to research things, which is why we are in the position we are, trying to educate people to what's really going on in the world. And again, look at the approval rating in Bolivia. The president's approval rating in Bolivia is around 12%. So now this week, the New York Times comes out and says, well, the only reason Eva was in power is because the cocaine smugglers are backing him. Here we go. The cocaine smugglers? Who would that be? Again, this is just how we operate. We try to create unrest in situations where we can attack our adversaries, and I think that's all that Hong Kong was, and I actually think it's over. I just don't see it going any further. As far as for the telecommunications company out of China, they are by far growing, expanding, and taking over market share by the day, whether Americans know it or not. And, those facts are out there. I'm not making them up. Look them up.
Okay. Jim, everything is about confidence when it comes to finances, and I sense that the bond markets that have always been described as the repository of trust, and bonds as a whole represent the complete distillation of how the world feels about things. Now, based on that alone, Jim, I think we're in for something really bad, and it's coming really soon. If the overnight repo support is spiking up to $250 billion, $250 billion, this has got to indicate that there are some serious issues on the bond, on and in the bond market. Everything is leading to to think that this is all about illiquidity. Jim, you got any thoughts on that?
Cause and effect. Illiquidity is a very simple thing to blame, because the word illiquidity is extraordinarily hard to define outside of your own experience. The only cause that would create what's taking place in overnight money is an unwillingness to lend bank to bank. And the only thing that can create an unwillingness to lend financial institution to financial institution is the view that some or more financial institutions are not going to be able to repay. And it's been that way every time this has happened. So why should it be any different now? As that phenomena continues to do nothing but expand, that means that confidence in that area does nothing but contract, cause and effect. Whatever's going on to make that happen, we don't know. It is a means of temporary camouflage. It has never, in the history of finance, cured the problem, but only been the precursor of more serious difficulties.
Bill, I'm going to push that, talking about banks that Jim says the thieves don't trust other thieves. You warned us that some of the world's largest banks are in the midst of a very serious financial strait months, if not years ago. And it's not just Deutsche Bank, but a lot of the so-called sci-fi banks here in the United States. Sci-fi, for our listeners, is systemically important financial institution, sci-fi. Bill, those sci-fi banks are probably right smack dab in the middle of their overnight repo illiquidity, and I'm guessing that they're all linked through their derivative holdings. Now, I heard you say once, and I'm not sure whether it was you or somebody else, talked about death spiral in describing the likes of Wells Fargo and Citigroup. Can you give me your interpretation of what death spiral means for banks?
Well, literally, it's when they get shut off from credit. Because, and I keep harping on this, everything down to the loaf of bread runs on credit. But when you're a bank, if anything, I mean, credit to a bank is like putting gasoline in your car. If you run out of gasoline, the car doesn't go anymore. If a bank runs out or something's wrong with the fuel pump or the fuel line of credit, they start sputtering, and it's over. And what's happening now is we don't know which banks they are, but a bank or several, many banks are scrambling each and every night to get fuel so that the car can operate the next day, and just for one day, because remember, these are overnight loans that get paid back the next day. So as far as a death spiral is concerned, you shut the credit off and the banks die. And jumping back to the last question, really the only buyers in the credit markets globally are the central banks. I mean, there's no way, if you didn't have central banks that did QE all over the place and pushed interest rates down to where they are and bond prices up to where they are now, there's no individual bank or private, when I say private, I'm not talking about, an individual. I'm talking about individual banks that are publicly owned, but there would be no private bids for any of the bonds outstanding. The only reason there are bids for the bonds outstanding is because they believe that there will be further QE, and if they buy today at negative 0.1%, they're going to be able to sell at a later date at negative 0.2% and make a profit. So it's all about the confidence is there because they believe the central banks have their backs.
I originally had this for Jim, but Bill, I'm going to talk to you first and then let Jim respond to it. Back in 2007, and by the way, I'm the old family accountant. I was the guy from my family for 40 years who ran the books.
Were we just talking about accountants before the call?
Yeah, I know. That's how I'm telling you. But in 2007, I recall seeing the Federal Reserve's assets on their balance sheet in the $800 billion range. It might have been the $650 billion range, but here we are 12 years later, and it's 5 times that figure, probably nearing $4 trillion on the books. So, Bill, this is what Jim has always called a rhino horn, and if I'm looking at this right, in the next couple of years, the Fed could have a balance sheet of $20 trillion on the asset side.
Absolutely, they're going to.
So, unless I'm misinterpreting this, it's only a matter of time before the ongoing reset will be seen by the public. Yes? No? What do you think?
Absolutely. In order to sustain the system, the Fed went from. You were correct. They went from about $800 billion to about $4.4 trillion, and then they let it bleed off for about a year and a half, and that's when the credit problems started popping up again because there was not enough liquidity. They're going to have to. It's this time around. It's not going to take an additional $4 trillion. It's going to take multiples of that. So your number of $20 trillion, as far as their balance sheet is concerned, that's probably right on. And it may even be low.
I'm just extrapolating what Jim has taught us over the years, that once it goes logarithmic, it cannot, short of a collapse. Jim, you want to weigh in on it?
Well, it's, rhino horn is an unsustainable explosion. But in this case, it's indicative not so much that the amount that the central bank is collecting and the size of the balance sheet will contract, but the value of what the central banks represent, or the fiat currency system, will lose its character, if it can even be called to have one, to sustain buying power over time. So the overnight money ostensibly is repaid the next day. Bill, Denny, David, how do you know? Okay. This number is supposed to be a rotating number, not a collecting number. Guys, how do you know? We're not in as the public sees, any serious problem, but they are certainly the last people to know. We have a president who is well-intended, but he did come from a reality show of sorts, and being a real estate builder as well. I think this whole thing, if anybody ever saw the movie The Truman Show, is exactly correct. And the way that ended is the fellow didn't even know he was the star of a reality show. He thought it was real life until he decided that he wanted to go out and see the world, more or less. He took a boat out into the ocean, except it wasn't an ocean. He went straight into a cement wall. Well, the cement wall is overnight money, and we are going directly into that. And this whole thing is make-believe, totally make-believe. And it is, and the nonsense that's going on in governments whose actions are to destroy each other by stealth and lies and the lack of ethics and truth. This whole thing is going to explode, and it's exploding right in front of your eyes. Gold leases were supposed to be 1 year. They're permanent. They roll over, okay? How do you know that overnight money doesn't also roll over? So what I'm suggesting to you is everything that we're predicting to happen is happening right now. So when does this boat in the Truman Show sail into a wall and realize there's no ocean there, and that the whole thing has been fake, including his wife, his family, his friends, his government, his money, his job, etc., etc. It might be very good to add that to the color purple and wag the dog in terms of predictive, artistic, futuristic predictions by the way of entertainment.
What you're
Jim,
calling?
Jim,
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
What you're saying, finance is fake. If you go back to late 2008, you remember the big fight over TARP, which was supposed to be $700 billion.
Yes.
And everybody was going crazy. Oh, I mean, it's going to bankrupt the nation, blah, blah, blah. And then we find out a year and a half later that in the early part of 2009, the Federal Reserve lent $16 trillion all over the world. 16 trillion, 20 times $700 billion.
Low. That could be low. So what is it has already happened, Bill? Okay, but the puppeteers are really quite magnificent at keeping the reality show rolling.
Right, and it's done with derivatives.
Yes, it is done with derivatives. It interlocks all banks. Do you think anybody in an HBC or in any of these what used to be fine names cares about the names? They only care about keeping the puppet show running and getting as much out of it as they can, as fast as they can. In my opinion, it is over. It is finished. What you're looking at is the Truman Show. It's going to go into a wall, and the wall is called credit. And before the sailboat goes into the wall, and the main actor finds out that this entire thing, everything about his life is phony. Truthfully, that wall is called credit. It's happening right in front of our eyes. But just like the reporting taking place is so politically biased from both sides, so the puppeteers run the media, and the mindlessness of the public is probably the highest in the history of man.
All right, so we've been talking about make-believe. Dave, I want to talk about reality. The U.S. dollar has...
Does somebody have a speakerphone on? Because we're getting an echo.
Not that I know. No.
Dave, are you on speaker?
No, I'm on my cell phone. I'm mute.
Okay.
All right, we'll give it another shot here. Dave, the U.S. dollar was always considered to be supreme, probably in part to the strength of the United States military. I really don't keep up with the situation in military capability or military superiority. However, I did read this week that Russia has not only superior military capability to the U.S., but even the new United States military initiatives are developing only second-rate capabilities in comparison. Dave, can you bring us up to speed on where the United States stands militarily in comparison to Russia or to China?
Yeah, can you say Boeing 737 MAX? Everything in this country is about profit, Denny. Profit comes first. We may spend more money than everybody else on military budgets, but what we end up with is not the best product. And when I say not the best product, we have programs that we just keep throwing money at and throwing money at and throwing money at, and we pay people top dollar to keep working on these. If you take a country like Russia or China, is it a state-controlled industry? Absolutely it is, and they get more bang for their buck. If you were to break out, and the SACR is a very good place to go for it, this type of information, Russia's military capabilities far exceed those of the United States at this present time. Russia is putting their hypersonic weapons into use before 2019 ends, means within the next 30 days. Russia has underput and has made huge strides in their military capabilities, and that is causing a lot of discomfort in the Western world. You're seeing NATO now saying they're going to expand into space-based forces. We just keep throwing money away, and the more money we throw away, as Bill has said, the less bang we get for our buck. We have $21 trillion missing. Catherine Austin Fitz did an interview recently with Greg Hunter, also with James Corbett. And when we talk about $21 trillion missing, like she said, this is going into deep underground military bases, dumb, which is what they're the acronym is. They've gone into secret space programs. We have no idea what our government's doing with this money. There is no accountability. Congress, if they know, has got the tightest lips in the world because they haven't said anything to us. So what we have is, we have thievery going on in this country. Our money is being stolen. We're supposed to be in a free country, a democracy. They're all supposed to be answerable to us. That is not how this is playing out. We are answerable to them. They continue to, as Jim was saying earlier and Bill was saying, we can't trust any of the numbers, like Catherine Austin Fitts says. With FASB, I think it was at 56, they just basically could make up anything they want. They could lie to us. They could not tell us. You have no recourse. I mean, that's not the America we grew up in. That's not the country that I was taught about in school. The country that I was taught about in school, our leaders were responsible to us. It was our money that they were spending. And I understand there has to be some secrecy, but we've gone full bananas in this country. $21 trillion, like Catherine Austin Fitts pointed out. Do you have any idea how much money that really is? And that's only what we could find. How do we know how much money the Fed has really printed? As Jim said earlier, we have no idea how much the banks are passing out. As Bill pointed out, in 2008, they said $700 billion and it was $16 trillion. So we go back to my thinking. Everything they tell us is a lie. Everything they tell us is a lie. Everything is rigged. We don't get to count the votes. We don't get to count anything. We have no idea what they're doing. There's no accountability. There's no rule of law. And until there is, we have to assume the worst, not the best. And I don't see how anybody could argue with that based on what we've seen the past 20, 30, 40 years of our life.
Okay. Jim, I think the Saudi Arabia, their balance sheet, I think they're almost broke. And I think they've lied about the reserves for so long. I think there's a skunk in the woodpile, brother. They suddenly want to offer their so-called vast energy resources to the public markets, and they're expecting trillions of dollars in this Aramco deal. Jimmy, you're the old stock market guy and the observer more than any of us here. So I'd like your take on this pending Aramco IPO in Saudi Arabia. Is this a pig in a poke, or is this the real deal?
It's not the real deal. What they're selling you is what they don't have. And if the figures they give, they may have come to believe their own propaganda, but people in that business know it's not true. And when you reach for that kind of funds, you got to have a degree of reality to what you're peddling, as we've just seen from the real estate IPO that didn't happen. I would be amazed to see that transaction take place in the form that everybody began and still to some degree believe it might. They're selling air. Okay?
And Jim, $2 trillion is more than the market cap of our entire oil service industry combined.
Well, Saudi Arabia is not a nice place. All right, just leave it at that. They've been our friends because we've had financial connections with them, and we've used them as they've used us. This is the bailout. Anybody who can't see that's blind. And I'd be very surprised to see it succeed.
Denny, can I jump in here 1 second? Because I believe I posted an article about this, that China is purchasing gobs and gobs of oil from Saudi Arabia, which is, helping them at this particular moment.
26 million barrels a day.
And they're paying for it with renminbi. You're exactly right, Dave.
Right. So, where does this all lead to then? It leads to what we're saying. Saudi Arabia is going to be owned by China, and they're going to have to break the dollar peg on oil, are they not? Or lose their biggest customer.
All right, Dave. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia for a minute. If they've been getting closer and closer to Russia, this Aramco IPO is not even going to be listed on the U.S. exchanges from what I'm hearing. Would it not be logical to think that after the IPO that the Russians are going to end up ultimately taking control of the oil production in Saudi Arabia? Is that not a logical expectation?
It's possible. I'm not sure they want to, because as we said earlier, I'm not really sure how much oil is there, Denny. You can go back years ago, and I can't remember the individual's name.
Why would Russia even want Saudi Arabia to produce anything? The less they produce, the more their oil is worth. Russia.
Correct.
All right. Well, now, wait a minute. It came out in the impeachment hearing, Bill, that Putin and Russia see U.S. oil and gas fracking as a direct threat to their oil and natural gas industry. Do you think that the U.S. exporting energy to Europe or their alignment with Saudi Arabia?
That's from mainstream news. Putin understands that, you frack, you drill and you frack, you're going to get a gusher to start. And within 6 months or a year, it's a trickle. He's not.
It's a half-life. It's the half-life series.
Yeah, he's not a dumb guy. He understands. And he also understands that all the fracking is being done with credit. That's an industry that is going to die completely. It's going to blow up and end up as in a black hole of bankruptcy.
Okay, Bill, since you're talking, let's go back to this.
I just got one question for you. Did you talk about impeachment during Thanksgiving?
Did I?
Yeah.
I was with my mom. My mom doesn't talk about stuff like that. Are you kidding me? Now, it came out in the impeachment hearings. I'm just telling you what I remembered hearing. So, yeah. All right. So, Bill, you said that the central banks have pretty much trapped themselves. On the one hand, they've got to keep interest rates low so that they can continue to finance government deficits. And at the same time, nobody's interested in buying them if the interest rates are low. So in order to do the refinancing, if interest rates are too low and not commensurate to the risk of holding them,
they have to be the buyer.
Yeah. So, Bill, that's just direct monetization. This isn't going to end very well.
Well, like Jim said, it's ended. We just don't know it yet. I mean, once you start to monetize, and frankly, that's what QE1 to begin with was. That's what we were doing even prior to 2007, 2008. But once QE started, that was direct monetization.
It's a masquerade, a total masquerade. And it's reaching its limits because it was hoped after 2007, 2010 that they had the thing in control. And guess what has happened? It's out of control again. And the key to it being out of control is a lack of the willingness of financial institution to lend to financial institution. And the only place you can see that is in overnight transactions, which I don't think are overnight.
Jim, a couple of things to note in the financial industry. In the last couple of weeks, we have heard things that I didn't think I'd ever hear. First of all, Charles Schwab is buying TD Ameritrade. But the other one that really caught me flat-footed was that Goldman Sachs is opening up their services, what we call the elite of the elite services, to non-elite everyday investors. Jim, these are big changes for the industry, but on the one hand, we see Schwab buying their biggest competitor in TD Ameritrade, and then Goldman Sachs is sort of going down the food chain for more and more clients. Any comments about what might this portend?
Well, that's almost a subject that should be one of the key points of what we look at as we go into the new year. What does the financial world of tomorrow look like? You have to realize that when the May Day, they call it, back in my day, when the commission, when fixed commissions were ended and negotiated commissions started, the beginning. That was the beginning of the huge change in the financial world. I was a partner then in a New York Stock Exchange firm, which is a clearing partner and a clearing firm, and in competition with Pershing. And it was easy to see that there was no way we were going to make money. We went to the New York Stock Exchange and told them we're going to roll it up. They asked if we had a receiver. We said, for what? They said, well, aren't you in financial trouble? No, we're preventing ourselves from getting into financial trouble. When you trade for people for nothing, as the computer-based trading houses are doing now, you've got to think exactly how are they going to pick the pockets of people. When Goldman Sachs hires 6,000 computer engineers and fires their entire trading department except 2 people, they've got something in mind which doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before. So the question is, this is something that I think about every day in the essence of what you ask. Where are we going in this financial world? And I can't tell you that I have the answer, but I can tell you that I'm sure working on it. And I think we'll have it, the 4 of us, before anybody else does. But it's going to be like nothing you've ever seen before. It is what exists after the second reset.
So what does Goldman Sachs think that if it used to be in order to deal with Goldman Sachs, you needed a portfolio of $3 to 5, maybe even $10 million.
You need a recommendation?
Yeah, you needed to be invited into the club. Well, now they're saying that they're going to go after $500,000 accounts, which there are many Americans, middle Americans.
We used the big accounts already.
They've done all they can.
Are they going to trade free? What exactly?
No, they're going to be investment. I'm sure it's going to be fee-based, Jimmy, but I don't know for sure.
And Denny, with the TD Ameritrade, Schwab, those companies, they weren't making money on $7.95 or $4.95 trades. They're getting paid by the exchanges to do trades
for volume.
For volume, and they're lending out all the securities.
There's where they're making their money on stock lending and volume bonuses.
Well, it's a big-time change for the financial industry. This is the game changer of this decade for sure.
I think what you're watching is the end. Okay, you've seen what existed back when I first was in finance no longer exists. What I love the most as my occupation no longer exists. There are no specialists in anything, anywhere. The name is there, but there's nobody committing capital. And if you don't commit capital to a market when it's rising and there's no supply, or falling and there's no demand, that's what the specialists did. There's no such thing anymore.
Until 1987.
Yeah. And all of this is the product of becoming less liquid at every step. So, if they didn't make money at $4.95 trading, for computer-based speculators, what are they going to make, Bill, at nothing? 0. So how are they going to steal your money? Because these changes are not competitive changes. You see, they are changes to the structure for a purpose, all cause and effect, all puppeteers. And the question is, in this Truman Show we call reality. Definition of reality, by the way, is what is real to anyone, okay? So there is no definition to reality. They figured that out. So when this construct is done, what does the next one look like? And I tend to think it's going back more to the Middle Ages and to the majority of people being serfs.
I tell you what, when you look at it from 10,000 feet above the ground, you look down at this and you say margins are collapsing. Yeah, I know. But margins are collapsing. So if Schwab's margin is collapsing, Ameritrade's margins are collapsing, they combine them, they might be able to keep it alive. If I look at Goldman Sachs, their margins have to be collapsing, so they've got to go after a different market in order to maintain their economic viability. I think in a collapsing...
with the trading department. Remember that we haven't lost not one day have we had a loss in a year. That's where the derivatives rolled out through. In other words, where did all those credit derivatives that they laid off on the Fed, and then they rolled the profit out after they got the enormous extra TARP, where did the company show the profit? In the trading account. That wasn't real trading. That was taking the money from the government and profit and making derivatives worth nothing, all of a sudden worth something. So, again, here we go with the Truman Show. Make a believe. Now that's come to an end. What do you do? And what does tomorrow look like? Tomorrow looks like a very few running very many as a successful manipulation of people's minds through the manipulation of prospective economics mold that has actually worked better than even I expected.
So that's the title for this week, The Truman Show.
It is the Truman Show. The whole bloody thing is a Truman Show, and people should see that. They should think about that.
I'm going to put an article out tomorrow titled, Gold Was Money All Along. And that's what people are going to find out.
It was the time before the Romans, the barbarians, since time immemorial, gold has been the standard of value in which value was maintained. If you want to call that money, fine. There's a lot of other definitions to it. But it was the standard of value which has not failed to today. It's not going to, tomorrow, I think it's going to be an awful looking thing to most people because of the mass. Look at people shopping them Black Friday. They've got no money. They got credit cards, okay? And this is not good, especially this period of time. So the change, what we need to do is we need to know what the financial world of tomorrow will look like. Then in exactly the definition that you have, that you have given of what's taking place. And, my answer to it is very simple. If gold has always won, it will win again. Therefore, by having the most amount of gold one can have, one has the most security that can be obtained. And then just shut this damn show off. Okay?
Jim, think about what we've lost in the markets is what I call differentiation. They have commoditized everything. If Goldman Sachs if they're willing to commoditize the name Goldman Sachs and go down to the Walmart investor, something's wrong. If Schwab and TD Ameritrade have no gross margin, it's like the farmer who has 80 acres. The only way he can really feed his family is if he's farming, 600 acres because he's got no gross margin. So everything's commoditized.
Can I add
the derivatives made them a fortune because whatever anybody paid for a derivative fell to the bottom line. They sold them air. They sold them an agreement. There's nothing in there. It's a skeleton in cyberspace. All of that made them trillionaires, okay? After that was over, there was nothing left.
They got nothing.
David, what were you going to say?
David, what were you going to say?
You want to know what this consolidation looks like when it's all over? Look no further than MF Global. I mean, what did Corzine do with MF? He stole everybody's money and ran away, and now he's back. He's back scot-free.
Yep.
Well, it's a member of the club. It pays, doesn't it? In Skull and Bones, it pays. Go to Yale.
There's a guy from Stanford, Connecticut. His name's escaping me right now. The hedge fund criminal. Back in the game. How does this keep happening?
George Carlin said it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Right. So,
and that is the answer, but the club is falling apart, okay? This thing is headed towards the wall of the ocean that was only a pool. It is totally make-believe, and, it cannot be sustained. And I think probably you've seen the last great Black Friday, or whatever they call this day after Thanksgiving, where people spend money they don't have to spend, meaning, A, they don't need the crap to buy, and B, they don't have the money to pay for it. They got a piece of plastic.
Hey, I don't mean to scare you all. I've been saving this one for David. I don't know if you read the FBI alert about smart TVs that hackers can activate the camera and the speaker in your smart TVs. I told my buddy about that. He goes, "What? What you talking about?" I said, "That means they can watch you, bud." And he goes, "From my television?" David, you want to swing at that one?
Well, again, by the time they tell you, it's already out.
Yeah, they've already been doing it, yeah.
It's like by the time the New York Times reports an article like, let's use the alleged chemical weapons that never really happened, that was been a cover-up since the event took place in Syria, it's fake. And by the time they tell us about it, they're on to the whole next trick. This whole surveillance thing, and I know you guys probably are never going to have the time to do this, but again, a listener who, again, is really on top of the game, we stay in touch a lot. He sent me and it's Kevin, sent me a video on 5G, and I'm really well schooled in 5G. I've been following this forever. The documentary he sent me today was or yesterday. It's an hour and 17 minutes, and it's all about total control. If you understand how the government works, they want 100% total control, total information dominance. Everything you think, everything you hear, they're now going to control. They're going to take us to a cryptocurrency where they're able to keep track of every transaction you have. They will know every thought you have. They will know what you took out of your refrigerator. They know more about you than you know about yourself. That's where this is going. I don't want to say I know the end game, but it's almost so simple that if you can't see it, then somehow there's a problem, because it's been laid out for us. It's like I said to somebody, I wanted to talk to them, but I can't talk to them because I just won't use a phone. I won't type anything out. And I said, due to the fact that we can't have this conversation in person, there's a lot of things that I can't say. And I said, I wouldn't even write it on a letter and mail it, because I know they look at those also. And a very good friend of mine who's very well-versed in this was in 100% agreement. Even face-to-face, that conversation's tough to have and say it's not being listened to. Well, even if
remember the movie Enemy of the State, you should see it again.
Right.
Always look down at the ground.
Right. How do we know how good their satellites are? You have to assume the absolute worst. You can hope for the best, but if you're not assuming the worst. So to get back to this FBI story, they're warning us. They're warning us about what? They have some of the best hackers in the world. So they would be the first ones. And we know through Snowden's release, through William Briney's releases of the NSA information, that they know every conversation anybody on this planet has ever had via a communication device. Is that not correct?
I'd say you're pretty close, David.
Yeah, so, and we've known whenever they came, we talked about covering the computers, Denny.
I got more blowback on that one.
I got no blowback on that, and I've covered my computer for 10 years.
Really?
Right. But, and again, just to finish this off, what we have to realize is what we are up against. And for lack of a better word, assume you're up against AI. And unfortunately, that means you can't win. Jim, can you beat AI?
No, and that's the greatest physicist in the world, one of the greatest minds that's ever been. Prior to his death, said that when true AI has reached singularity, that will be the last invention man makes.
Correct.
The number one chess player in the world can't beat the computer.
All right, I'm going to change the subject right now. This is the last question. President Trump is supposedly the expert on bankruptcy. Bill, I'll let you go first, and then Jim, and then Dave. Now, wait a minute. You are not going to pass. His proponents say that he is the anointed one for dealing what will probably be a national bankruptcy. Bill, Jim, Dave, we're going to take you one at a time. Bill, how do you think a national bankruptcy would go down?
I think it'll be a lot messier. I think it's not going to be like a corporate bankruptcy. A corporate bankruptcy, when all is said and done, can be clean, and then it's done. But a national bankruptcy, what does that mean for future trade?
What does that mean for future bonds?
That's what I'm saying. What does it mean if you've gone through bankruptcy, you've crushed confidence. Confidence completely snapped. How do you sew the confidence back together? Now, one way to do it, if you do have some gold, then you mark the gold up, and your treasury is refilled not with more gold, but with gold that is
at a higher price.
Right, more valuable. Will have higher purchasing power. A national bankruptcy versus a corporate bankruptcy is, you can't even say that it's like 10D chess versus checkers, because there are so many complications, and each one of those complications, nothing can be fixed unless confidence somehow is repaired.
All right, so let me develop what you just said and go to Jim. Jim, do you think there will be a differentiation of busting out creditors? For instance, if I'm an American citizen and own a T-bill versus a foreign entity and owning a T-bill, you default on one but not the other?
No, I think that there'll be a reset, and in that reset, there'll be a cryptocurrency. And if we really reason this through, are not short-term treasury bills a form of cryptocurrency, and exactly how are treasury bills settled by computer? Is there a such thing as a treasury bill? No. What is a treasury bill? It's a cyberspace entity. The reset will be for the purpose of trying to maintain a semblance of order. The second reset will be public loss of confidence in the first reset, or the inability to reset order. And that has the dramatic effects that Bill has been talking about, and it's why my feeling is it's back to basics or nowhere.
Dave, you and I have been...
You got to take care of yourself. Got to be your own central bank. Okay, got to know how to take... You can't depend on anything. Don't depend on electricity. I've lived in the third world for a pretty much a great portion of my life, and I know that electricity and the things that we think are our right they are not. It's a privilege to have, and we become so used to the simplicities of our lives, and how many people could survive a blackout in New York City for 3 days. No, this is going to be more like what Bill says, and the reason for Bill and I and David and all of us consolidating our efforts is that we know that, and we would like people to become stronger, braver, more ethical, courageous. You cannot. There's no place for a wuss in what's coming.
David, I want to give this I want to go up to a third degree, and that is you and I have both been in business, and there is nothing more frustrating than to have a client who says, I'm going to pay you, I'm going to pay you, I'm going to pay you, and then at the last minute, you've extended more and more credit on the come, and then all of a sudden they do what we used to call the Tennessee roll and filed bankruptcy. And my apologies to anybody in Tennessee, but us Northerners, that's what we called it, the Tennessee rollover. Dave, if they file bankruptcy, there's going to be a lot of hurt people. Can commerce continue in that environment?
Yeah, parallel currencies. You know, everybody's used to taking the dollars, and first off, they've really limited the use of dollars. I mean, I can't believe how many people use credit cards. And you're talking to a guy who tries to never use a credit card. And I'm pretty good at it. I don't have one of my own, actually. I carry one that's technically my wife's for things like when you need to rent a car and crap like that.
Wait a minute. You're a kept man?
In that credit card sense, yeah. I haven't had a checking account in 15 years.
And she's a good woman. I know her.
Yeah.
Right. I try to stay away from all that stuff. It's like, again, it's just ways of spying on us. They want to know everything about you, what you do. Well, and again, what's the easiest way to just have two currencies? I mean, Americans are still going to make believe that, you know, this is what's going on. But when we have to conduct business overseas, you're going to see a significant difference in the dollar's value. And again, whether they do it with a cryptocurrency on a reset, I have no idea on that. Some people have more insight than I do, but I just look at it from the simplest form. You know, we saw what happened in Germany. We've seen what's happened in Argentina. You know, it's not like this would be the first, oh, my God, what did they do? Well, what did people in Argentina do? Right? You know, this is
barter comes forth.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, society doesn't come to a grinding halt, but your ability to conduct business goes on, but the value of your currency has just been decimated, absolutely decimated. And again, not to, you know, some of my friends call me like a Russian agent. I'm like, all I do is call shots. I'm looking at a baseball field or a football field, and I'm telling you who I think's the best coach. And in this particular sentence, when you see what Putin said last week, the man doesn't talk out of his back end. As a matter of fact, you look at what took place when Turkey shot down his fighter jet. The man is so measured that rather than instinctively freak out and I'm going to get even with that son of a. He measures everything he does. And what that means when I look at guys like him or Jinping, they measure, they think 5 times before they should say something. I remember back a principal in a school saying to me once, you should always wait 5 minutes before you answer some questions because it gives you time to think clearly.
This would be a long show.
Well, so Putin said what? The dollar's going to collapse soon. What we're talking about has already been announced.
Yeah, and soon was not just a flippant remark.
Exactly. He didn't just shoot that out of his butt because he had nothing better to say. That's not his style.
No.
And again, use as an example, and I don't want to drag this out, but, Zero Hedge, and I read a lot of their stuff, but you always have to research, like, Gatestone. They'll put stuff from Gatestone up. Well, look who Gatestone is. It's John Bolton and another couple of neocons. So you really have to be careful even about what they post. You have to look up who wrote the piece and who's behind the people who wrote the piece. Well, when you break this whole thing down to where we are at this particular moment in time, you have to say to yourself, all bets are off. And can we get a reset like Jim's talking about? On a Sunday night, you would never even know it's coming. Monday morning, you could wake up, and you will still have dollars in your pocket, and you could put on the news, and everything in your life is going to seem fine, except for, I'll use as a simple example. Today I went in and bought 50 pounds of black bird seed, sunflower seed for the birds, except it wasn't 50 pounds. It was 40 pounds, and it was $24.99. I used to pay $19.99 for 50 pounds. I bought a thing of cereal, Raisin Bran, 1 pound and a couple ounces. That's funny. We had a box in storage from 2015 because, again, I survival retard. We pulled that box out from 2015. It tasted just as good as the new stuff, and the box was almost twice as big as the one I just bought. It's happening, as Jim said, right now. They're doing it in a way that you don't realize it because it's a little bit at a time like the boiling frog, but you're seeing it. One day you're going to get up, and I don't know, Jim says cryptocurrency for the first reset. I wouldn't argue that at all. It's going to happen.
David, you're a good one. You're not crazy. It's just the rest of us don't always understand it. Yeah. All right, guys, we're right a little bit over an hour. Dave, I'll let you wrap up, and then we'll go to Jim and Bill.
That's it. All I could say to people is keep it simple, stupid. Because the simpler it is, the easier it is.
That's Mr. Stupid to you, please. All right. All right, Bill, have you got anything?
Just that next week you're not going to be here. I'm going to post something asking for readers' questions. And please don't ask, when is gold going up? How high is it going to go? And what is the date?
All right.
Because we'll can that. But we are going to ask for questions. And then possibly the next week will be a day late.
A day late. How about you, Jim? You got anything?
Well, I'm just ruminating a bit and mulling over something that, that we were talking about. What is a U.S. Treasury bill other than a cryptocurrency? So it's already happened. I'm going to go back to the statement that everybody's predicting is fact right now, not recognized as if the whole world is a reality show, and the leaders of the world are the heads of the reality shows.
Hey, one thing we did not talk about, and I'll just say, check the news. There was big news out released from TRX yesterday.
Oh, wonderful news.
Yeah,
they're mining.
It's good.
All right, we should leave that. We'll leave that one alone, but just tell everybody. All you got to do is go to any of the sites and just type in TRX News, and you're going to get a beautiful surprise. Guys,
before we say anything, and we end up like Martha Stewart, let's call it a night.
Good night, Grace. Hey, listen, there's no place I'd rather be on a Saturday afternoon.
All right. Later, guys.
Goodbye, fellas. Thank you very much.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.